the next question is the law, the underlying law, is that constitutional? What do you make of the Second Amendment case here? Because he did, there's been some interesting stuff with this. The judge, like you mentioned, the judge said you can't use that. The way that they had initially argued this, which was a facial challenge to the law. The Hunter Biden's lawyers tried to claim that the underlying law that prohibits people from being addicted to drugs or drug users and possessing firearms, that it is unconstitutional on its face, that there's no constitutional application of this law possible because of the Second Amendment. And that didn't work, right? That's what failed at both the district judge level and then also at the appellate court level when they reviewed that argument. However, since then, Hunter's lawyers have filed an as-applied challenge, which just says not that the whole law is unconstitutional necessarily in all applications. Like there may be some constitutional applications of this law, but as it's applied to Hunter Biden, in this case where there's no, accusations of violent behavior, there's no accusation that he used the gun to commit any sort of other crimes. He doesn't have a criminal record to this point. And that this is a nonviolent offense, just that he's a drug user. And there aren't even accusations that he was intoxicated while he was buying or handling the firearm, right? So under those circumstances, they're saying the Second Amendment protects his right to have that gun and that the law is unconstitutional. Where do you think that's going to head? What do you make of that argument?
I think it's a good argument. I mean, I have read U.S. versus Daniels, both the cert petition from Merrick Garland as well as the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decision that found that as applied to Patrick Darnell Daniels, Section 922G3 is also unconstitutional. And, the Fifth Circuit's decision basically said, if you look at the national tradition of gun ownership in this country, especially dating back to 1791, there were no laws that said, hey, if you use an intoxicating substance, you can't own a firearm. You can't keep and bear arms. But you did have, they found longstanding statutes, longstanding traditions against possessing a firearm, actively possessing a firearm while you are intoxicated, right? So that was where the Fifth Circuit came down, that if this is a law that says, hey, if you're drunk, if you're high, you can't hold onto a gun, that's a crime, that's okay. But telling people you can't possess a firearm, you can't own a firearm because you use drugs or because you drink, that's a no-go. And I think that is a fair reading. If you want to take a very textual approach to the Second Amendment and to what laws were on the books in 1791, I think that that's accurate. I wonder, though, Stephen, when this gets out into the real world here, I think a majority of Americans would agree. If you possess a medical marijuana card, you should be able to own a gun, even if the federal government says marijuana is still Schedule 1. I think you'd find majority support for Americans believing that those folks should be able to own a firearm. I suspect it probably is a 50-50 proposition if you're talking about recreational use of marijuana. And then I suspect when we get into harder drugs like cocaine, methamphetamine, fentanyl, you probably don't have a majority of Americans who agree that those individuals who are using those drugs or who are addicted to those drugs should be able to purchase a firearm and exercise their Second Amendment rights. Again, I'm very libertarian in my viewpoints, and even I struggle with that idea of, okay, someone is a known meth addict, right? They are struggling. Maybe they're not even struggling. Maybe they're just fine being a meth addict. Does that automatically make them dangerous enough to prohibit them from possessing a firearm? And I don't know that that's an easy case. I think that we kind of see this split in the Second Amendment groups, right? Where you've got organizations like FBC who've said, hey, we're defending Hunter Biden. If he wants to rely on us for help, just give us a call. We'll do it. And then you got the NRA saying, well, Hunter Biden broke the law, and this is what happens when you break the law, essentially. So I think that even into a world, I think we're more, we're less reluctant to talk about it than the gun control groups, but I don't know that there is a consensus within Second Amendment communities as to, okay, if Section 922G3 is unconstitutional, well, what does a constitutional law look like?
Yeah, I think that's a really accurate breakdown of where things seem to be right now. I mean, the gun control groups don't want to talk about this at all, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things President Joe Biden did, just in a feat of amazing optics, is that right after his son was convicted on these gun crime charges, he went and spoke at Everytown's national conference, didn't mention the conviction, and then left that conference to go and comfort his son, which just is kind of remarkable. And yeah, you haven't seen them talk about it at all. And then there's this sort of split, and I think it does go back to what you're mentioning here, of the people probably are much more comfortable with marijuana users being able to own guns. And you mentioned Joe Rogan earlier. I don't think most people are outraged that he's not being arrested and thrown in jail for that. Right. There may be some, but I don't think it's a common feeling. However, there does seem to be I think in America, and to be honest, the judicial system as well, a split on marijuana. And I think even within the Biden administration, right, because they've tried to sort of lessen the criminal punishments for marijuana use at the federal level, in what they can do from an administrative standpoint. Now, they haven't taken it out of this category where you can't own guns and smoke weed, but
right, they're still trying to put Patrick Daniels behind bars for 46 months. I think that was what he was sentenced to for using marijuana and owning guns.
Yeah, but they have tried to move it down the schedule list, I believe. So the punishments are less severe for just marijuana possession at the federal level now than they used to be. But there's a very different opinion for harder drugs, like what Hunter Biden was using, crack cocaine, things that people perceive as addictive, much more addictive than something like marijuana. And I think you've seen that dichotomy in federal courts as well, where marijuana users have fared a bit better in these challenges like Daniels than other users of harder drugs.